Hi everyone. Today I'll be talking about neural circuits. My main focus is how neurons work together to move information through the body. I'll explain how the nervous system detects a stimulus, processes that information, and then creates a response. So, what is a neural circuit? A neural circuit is basically a pathway made of connected neurons. These neurons they do not work alone. They work as a team to move information from one place to another. For example, when the body detects something like heat or pain, that information has to travel to the nervous system, be processed, and then led to a response. The main functions of the nervous system. So basically, the nervous system has three main jobs: sensation, integration, and response. Sensation means detecting a change, such as heat, pressure, or pain. Integration means the brain or spinal cord processes that information. And then response means the body reacts, usually through a muscle or a gland. So the nervous system is not just receiving information, it is also deciding to do with that information. So my example I have here is touching a hot stove that sends a sensory signal, and then that goes to the spinal cord integration. Then a muscle contraction happens, and then that responds or leads to your hand pulling away. So the nervous system is divided into central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system includes the brain and spinal cord, and this is where information is basically processed. The peripheral nervous system includes the nerves outside the brain and the spinal cord. In a neural circuit, the peripheral nervous system brings information into the central nervous system and also carries the response back out of the body. So the functional types of neurons. Neurons can be grouped by what they do. The sensory neurons, or the afferent neurons, bring information toward the central nervous system. And the inner neurons are inside the central nervous system, and they help process the signal. And the motor neurons, or the efferent neurons, they carry information away from the central nervous system to a muscle or a gland. So basically, these three types work together to complete the circuit. Structural types of neurons in the neural circuit. Neurons can also be grouped by their shape. So the cerebropolar neurons are important for sensory information. Their cell bodies are found in the dorsal root ganglia, and the multipolar polar neurons include inner neurons and motor neurons. This structure helps them receive and send signals in different directions within the circuit. So parts of a neuron. Each part of the neuron has a role in communication. So the dendrites receive information. The cell body controls the neuron and contains the nucleus. The axon carries the signal away from the cell body. And at the end, the axon terminals pass the signal to the next cell. So the structure of the neuron helps the signal move in one direction. Spinal cord cross-section. In this slide, shows how the spinal cord in cross-section sensory information enters from the dorsal side through the dorsal root. The sensory neuron cell body is located in the dorsal root ganglia, and the motor information leaves from the ventral side through the ventral root. Also, the gray matter contains cell bodies and the inner neurons, while the white matter contains axons. So, in the sensory input enters the spinal cord. This is the first part of the pathway. A stimulus, like heat or pain, is detected by the sensory receptors. Then the sensory neuron carries that signal toward the spinal cord, and the signal passes through the dorsal root ganglion, and then it enters through the dorsal root and reaches the dorsal horn. And then from there, the information can be passed to the inner neurons in the central nervous system. Integration in the central nervous system. So once the signal reaches the central nervous system, that means it has been officially processed. This process is called integration. Inner neurons are important here because they connect the sensory neuron to the motor neuron, and they help organize the response so the body knows what action to take. So in this slide, basically after the information is processed, the response leaves the spinal cord through a motor neuron. The motor neuron cell body is located in the ventral horn. Its axon exists through the ventral root, and it travels to a target, such as the muscle. If the target is a muscle, the response is usually muscle contraction. So basically, the first step will be inner neuron in the central nervous system, which then leads to go to the motor neuron. Then it targets the ventral horn and then goes to the ventral roots. And then the muscles that goes to the muscles and gland, and that go triggers the response. So how do neurons function? Basically, this slide summarizes how the neurons work together. So first, a stimulus is detected. And basically, a stimulus is a change inside or outside the body. And then the sensory neuron sends the information toward the central nervous system. Then the inner neurons process the information and help decide the response. The inner neuron processes the signal, and then that helps decide what response should happen by connecting the sensory neurons to the motor neurons. And then finally, the motor neuron sends the response away from the central nervous system. So again, it's the stimulus, then the afferent signal, then integration, and then the efferent response. So an example of a neural circuit. A simple example is touching a stove. The heat is the stimulus, and then the sensory neurons detect the heat and then it sends the signal towards the spinal cord. So if you touch something hot, that heat is the stimulus. So then the sensory neurons in you, they detect that heat that you touched, and that heat sends, and then a signal is sent to to the spinal cord. Then the inner neurons process the information inside the central nervous system that you basically touched something hot. Then the motor neurons send a signal to the muscles for you to pull your hand away from that heat, which causes the hand to pull away. So it's stimulus, then sensory neuron, then inner neurons, then motor neurons, and then finally a response. So, putting it all together basically, and this image shows how the full pathway together. The signal starts at the skin and it travels through the sensory neuron into the spinal cord and is processed by inner neurons, and then it leaves through the motor neuron. The final result is a quick response where the muscles contract and the hand moves away from the danger. So basically, that all happens if, for example, you touch something hot or if any type of thing you're going to do and you need to uh, pull your hand away, that's what's happening in your body. So to conclude, the neural circuits are important because they allow the body to communicate quickly and effectively. Sensory neurons bring information in, and the inner neurons process it. Okay, so that's an important part to remember. Sensory neurons bring information in, inner neurons process it, and motor neurons send the response out. And together, these neurons allow the body to sense, process, and respond. Thank you so much.